Page number 219, continued. It is curious that we find little of the traits of romanticism in Jane Austen's novels. She belongs to the time of Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley, Scott and others, but though she loves nature, it is basically an 18th century love for its gentler and more orderly aspects. It has nothing of Wordsworth's mysticism. She is equally untouched by the romantic passion. In her classical and ironical humor, she seems to have felt no breath of the change wrought by the new movement. It has often been noted how detached she is from the great events of her own day, which cannot even be guessed from a study of her novels. She was devoted to her two brothers, and it was only because of this that she at times showed some interest in sailors and naval officers. Otherwise, her detachment from the movement and events of the day is complete. Scott's principal contemporaries in prose fiction were three women who worked in a field entirely different from his, that of the modern social domestic novel. The first in order of time was Maria Edgeworth, whose influence on Scott's own production has already been noted. End of page 219, now page 220. She was a fairly voluminous writer, but her best work is to be found in some of her short tales and in three Irish novels, Castle Recreant, The Absentee and Ormond. Her stories are over-didactic, but they have humor and pathos, and though very unequal, are brightly and simply written. Susan Edmonston Ferrier, whose three novels, Marriage, Destiny and The Inheritance, were also greatly admired by Scott, was a clever painter of Scottish, as Miss Edgeworth was of Irish characters and manners. They are therefore slight in texture, but her touch was so sure, her humor so subtle, her characteristics so lifelike, that all competent critics regard her as one of the finest artists that English fiction has ever produced. With men writers, meanwhile, fiction exhibited greater variety of matter and method. Charles Robert Maturin carried on the wildest tradition of the romance, of fantasy and horror in a number of tales, of which Melmoth the Wanderer was the most successful, while Theodore Hook, one of the fun makers of his generations, produced a string of loosely written novels which, though they seem very flat today, greatly amused the public of their own time. Far more important than the work of either of these men is that of John Galt, whose Ayrshire Legates and Annals of the Parish contains some admirable pictures of contemporary Scottish life. With Thomas Love Peacock, a close friend of Shelley, fiction became the vehicle of witty satiric commentary upon the things, and they were many in society and literature which the author disliked. He continued to write till almost the end of his long life, but we name him here because his really characteristic work, Headlong Hall, Melincourt, Nightmare Abbey, and Crotchet Castle, was all done before 1832. As a matter of convenience, we may here also mention two followers of Scott in the historical romance period, John Payne Rainsford James Rainsford James, and William Harrison Ainsworth, whose best work appeared before the middle of the century. Neither has the slightest claim to literary distinction, but a few of the former's almost countless tales, such as Henry Masterton and Richelieu, are still readable, while the latter's Old St. Paul's gives a wonderfully vivid description of London in the days of the plague and the Great Fire. Essays have Potion shapes, and therefore it is understandable that though numerous attempts have been made to give definition of the essay, yet none has met with complete success. Bacon. The essay was, in the words of Douglas Bush, one of the late courses in the banquet of literature. Bacon was undoubtedly the father of the essay in England. A glance, however, may be cast at the rudiments of the essay, which may be found in the works of some prose writers before Bacon. Philip Sidney's defense of Poesy anticipates the regular critical essay. Caxton's preface are also more or less of the nature of essays. Gascoigne's making of verse consists of critical essays. Gausson's school of abuse is remarkably likewise. End of page 220 now, page 221. However, the first real essayist who employed the term essay for his compositions and who had more or less a clear conception of what he was about was Francis Bacon. He published a collection of 10 essays in 1597, which he enlarged and revised on the subsequent editions of 1612 and 1625. Bacon borrowed the general conception of the essay from the French writer Montaigne, whose essays had appeared in 1580, 17 years before the first of his own. Bacon must have perceived that the new genre was a fit vehicle for the expression of many ideas of his own. The word essay, etymologically speaking, means a trial or an attempt, something tentative, unorganized, lacking thoroughness. Bacon called his own essays dispersed meditations, indicating thereby their lack of method and organization. They are, according to him, certain brief notes set down rather significantly than curiously. With the publication of these notes, Bacon emerged as the first of English essayists, and in the words of Hugh Walker, he remains for sheer mass and weight of genius the greatest. Bacon followed by succeeding essayists is compared by Douglas Bush to a whale followed by a school of porpoises. In a word, Bacon's greatness as an essayist is due not only to his precedence but also his excellence. Some peculiar features of Bacon's essays may now be referred to. One of their distinct features is their impersonalness. We do not find in them the same warmth of personality and subjectivity as we find in the essays of, say, Lamb, the essayist par excellence. Bacon is always stately and magnificent and disdains to mix with his readers or to talk familiarly with them. He is a teacher rather than a companion. Well did he call his essays Well did he call his essays counsels civil and moral. His constant effort is to train the reader in the ways of the world. He was himself an out-and-out careerist, and his approach to the affairs of the world, as well as in the bulk of his counsels, is that of a careerist. He keeps himself aloof from moral and emotional considerations, and often looks like an English cousin of Machiavelli. A word about his style. As regards his use of language, Bacon is an anti-Ciceronian. He excels in giving short, pregnant, and pithy aphorisms packed with the worldly wisdom and the experience of a lifetime. His English achieves a high degree of compression thanks to 1. Use of the weightiest and simplest words, and 2. A persistent avoidance of superfluous words and very often even connectives. As Will Durant puts it, the story of philosophy, Bacon abhors padding and disdains to waste a word. He offers us infinite riches in a little phrase. The laconic quality of Bacon's style suffers a little in the second and third editions of his essays, when he adds a little colour and mellowness to his English. Even then, he remains a stringent adherent of brevity and a sworn enemy of all bulliness of expressions. His importance in the history of the English prose lies only in his naturalization of the essay in England, but also in the evolution of a pliant model of English prose. His immediate predecessors and contemporaries like Asseham, Hooker, Sidney, Lilly, and Raleigh wrote a prolix, involved, highly Latinized, excessively decorated, and unwieldy prose, which could never become a model of utilitarian workday prose suited to topics both high and low. As Hugh Walker observes in his essays, Bacon provided such a model for all his successors to follow, though of course with few changes. The character writers. If Bacon was the father of the English essay, he had few real sons, as none of his followers resembled him. Among his successors may be mentioned Ben Jonson and a comparatively unknown writer, Sir William Cornwallis, who in his own way set the tone of honest self-examination and unassuming communication. Ben Jonson's forceful personality continually breaks through his discoveries, a collection of notes on contemporary men of letters and affairs. In the first half of the 17th century, the essay took the form of what is called the character. The most important character writers were Joseph Hall, Sir Thomas Overbury, and John Earle. All of them modelled their characters on the first character writer, the ancient Greek writer Theophrastus, Theophrastus, Theophrastus. A character, generally speaking, is a formalized character sketch of a typical figure, such as a merchant, a fanatic Puritan, a milkmaid, or a drunkard. The characterization was often touched with satire and didactic tendency. Some of the characters drawn by the 17th century character writers are just wooden types, but a few are alive and somewhat individualized. The character, by its nature, did not lend itself to self-portrayal, nor did it resemble the Baconian essay, thanks to the humor and witty and satiric touches making for social criticism. Towards the Restoration, the character died, having outlived its utility. Other essayists of the 17th century. Among the essayists of the 17th century, other than the character writers, may be mentioned Sir Thomas Browne, Abraham Cowley, Halifax, Sir William Temple, and John Dryden. Browne did not write an essay in strict sense, but his most famous work, Religio Medici, can be treated as a personal essay, provided we overlook its length. Browne was a delightful egotist, and, as has been said, it is the perfect egotist who is the perfect essayist. Montaigne, the first essayist in the world literature, had said about his collection of essays, "I myself am the subject of this book." That is the approach of a typical essayist. But Bacon, in his performance, had struck a sharp note of contrast with his model. Browne, however, in words reminiscent of Montaigne, observed, "The world that I regard is myself. It is the microcosm of my own fame." Browne, however, in words reminiscent of Montaigne, observed, "The world that I regard is myself. It is the microcosm of my own frame that I cast my eye in." His rambling, informal, and highly personal approach give him true temper of a genuine essayist such as Lamb or Hazlitt. Abraham Cowley wrote a charmingly fresh prose and revealed himself in quite a few intimately personal essays such as "Of Myself, I Confess," writes he, "I love littleness almost in all things, a little inconvenient estate, a little cheerful house, a little company, and very little feast. And if I were ever to fall in love again, which is a great lesson, and therefore I hope I have done it, it would be, I think, with prettiest rather than with the majestical beauty." Though in some of his essays he assumes a markedly didactic tone, yet we can justly treat him as a connecting link between Bacon and the Romantic essayists. Halifax wrote a few essays which are discursive but couched in a pleasant style. Sir William Temple also wrote some good essays, but he related his topics rather academically, so that his essays come close to being popular lectures. Dryden was a versatile man of letters, being essayist, poet, critic, and dramatist. In every department of literature, he has much to his credit. Modern prose, it is often said, described him Modern prose, it is often said, begins with Dryden. Many of his prose writings are of the nature of critical essays. but his most ambitious work, the essay of dramatic poesy, is in dialogue form and looks more like a treatise than an essay. Treatise, 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 than an essay.